Could this crash happen again today? Is a question that lingers in the shadow of every major aviation disaster, but few stories carry the same weight, mystery, and chilling chain of events as Air France Flight 447. The night of May 31st, 2009 begins like countless others in long-haul aviation. Calm air, a heavy ocean of darkness below, and a highly experienced crew preparing a routine transatlantic crossing. Passengers board in Rio de Janeiro, unaware that the flight they trust will become one of the most infamous tragedies in modern aviation. At 7:29 p.m. local time, Air France 447, an Airbus A330, lifts off the runway, carrying 228 souls toward Paris. The cabin lights dim, engines hum with steady confidence, and the city lights fade behind them as the aircraft climbs into the quiet that only an oceanic night can produce. The first hours of flight unfold without a single sign of trouble. The crew settles into rhythm, autopilot engaged, steady cruising altitude reached. The captain, a seasoned aviator with thousands of hours, steps out for rest while two first officers monitor the flight. The intertropical convergence zone lies ahead, a region notorious for intense clouds, unpredictable winds, and towering thunderstorms that rise like dark cathedrals in the sky. This isn't unusual. Countless flights navigate this area every day. But tonight, inside those clouds, conditions will align in a way that transforms routine discomfort into escalating chaos. As the A330 approaches the storm line, the cockpit remains calm. The weather radar paints an increasingly dense wall ahead, but deviations are commonplace. Passengers rest beneath thin blankets, unaware that cold, supercooled crystals within the storm clouds hold the potential to disrupt the aircraft's most basic senses, its ability to know how fast it is flying. The Airbus, trusted and reliable, moves deeper into turbulence. Rain thunders against the fuselage. The cockpit lights flicker across the pilots' faces. The aircraft is steady, but the weather outside grows more aggressive. At 2:10 a.m. UTC, the first critical moment arrives. The pitot tubes, small instruments that measure the speed of the aircraft, begin to ice over. It happens subtly, silently. Tiny crystals accumulate across the probes, narrowing the airflow they need to measure velocity. Suddenly, the flight computers, receiving inconsistent signals, can no longer guarantee the accuracy of their readings. Autopilot disconnects with a chime that cuts through the cockpit. The aircraft jolts slightly as the two first officers take manual control. In the cabin, passengers feel only a small change, barely noticeable, but in the cockpit, this moment is the first domino falling. The sudden loss of autopilot is not an emergency by itself, but it instantly raises workload. The aircraft climbs slightly as turbulence worsens. The two pilots communicate quickly but with rising tension. Conflicting airspeed data appears. Within seconds, multiple flight system warnings activate. The Airbus, confused by contradictory information, switches modes. The night outside is pitch black. There is no horizon, no stars, only turbulence and the relentless shaking of an aircraft at high altitude in unstable air. The junior first officer pulls back on the side stick, raising the nose. Airspeed drops further. Stall warnings blare, sharp and aggressive. In the dim glow of cockpit displays, numbers fluctuate wildly. The crew, overwhelmed by alarms and unclear instrumentation, struggles to interpret what the aircraft is actually doing. The stall warning stops, then returns, then stops again, due to the erratic speed data. The inconsistency creates doubt. The stall, an aerodynamic condition where the wings lose lift, requires lowering the nose. But in moments thick with stress, darkness, and equally experienced pilots interpreting the same chaos differently, clarity becomes a rare and fleeting commodity. The aircraft climbs sharply, far above its optimal altitude, where the air is too thin to support such an angle. The A330 shudders, warning again of stall. The junior pilot continues pulling the nose upward, believing the aircraft needs to climb to escape severe turbulence. But with every second, the Airbus loses more lift, more energy, and more stability. The stall becomes deep, fully developed, and catastrophic. The aircraft's altitude begins to drop, first gradually, then rapidly. A silent downward spiral begins from 38,000 feet over the Atlantic. The captain rushes back into the cockpit, awakened by the alarms and urgent calls. He scans the situation, but the displays offer conflicting truths. The aircraft is falling at thousands of feet per minute, but the dark environment outside offers no visual cues. The captain tries to regain control, but crucial moments have slipped away. The A330, fully stalled, descends nose-high, engines producing thrust, but wings unable to fly. For over 3 long minutes, the aircraft continues this uncontrolled fall. No one in the cabin fully understands the danger. The descent feels more like turbulence than a dive. There is no dramatic drop, no violent mess of screams. Just a silent, continuous loss of altitude, the kind that leaves passengers hoping the shaking will eventually stop. At 2:14 a.m., the Airbus drops below 10,000 feet. The ocean surface rises invisibly through the blackness. The cockpit voice recorder captures focused, desperate attempts to regain stability. Controls move, commands are spoken, but the aircraft remains locked in its stalled configuration. The stall warning continues until suddenly, everything ends. Air France Flight 447 hits the Atlantic Ocean with massive force. No debris scatters in the air. No explosion lights the sky. The aircraft disappears instantly into the dark waves, leaving only silence above the water where it once flew. In the hours that follow, the world wakes to news that a commercial aircraft has vanished mid-flight. Families wait at Charles de Gaulle Airport for loved ones who will never arrive. Air France announces that contact was lost somewhere over the Atlantic. Search teams mobilize, but the ocean is vast, and the flight path crosses some of the deepest waters on Earth. The initial debris found floats alone, seat cushions, small pieces of fuselage, and fragments of hope that point to the enormity of the tragedy. But the black boxes, the heart of understanding, remain lost underwater for nearly 2 years. When search teams finally locate the wreckage, lying silently on the ocean floor, the truth becomes clearer. The pitot tubes had iced over, the autopilot disconnect, the confusion in the cockpit, the aerodynamic stall, all become pieces of a chain reaction in which technology, weather, human factors, and rare failures aligned with deadly precision. The investigation reveals not a single-point failure, but an intricate web of small events, each one manageable alone, but collectively overwhelming. The aviation world responds. Airbus redesigns pitot tubes to resist icing. Airlines worldwide revamp stall recovery training, placing far greater emphasis on manual flight at high altitude and recognizing aerodynamic stalls in modern airliners. Weather radar training evolves, transoceanic flight monitoring improves, satellite-based tracking increases. The lessons of AF 447 carve themselves deeply into global aviation procedures. But the human side, the crew's confusion, the overload, the darkness, the unrelenting alarms, becomes a reminder that even the best pilots can be overwhelmed when technology falters at the worst possible moment. As years pass, the crash becomes more than just a tragedy. It becomes a case study taught in classrooms, training sessions, and flight academies around the world. Students listen to the cockpit voice recordings. Instructors break down the aerodynamic principles of high-altitude stalls. Airline crews simulate the scenario under the pressure of failing instruments. The legacy of the passengers and crew becomes the betterment of aviation safety for millions who fly after them. Yet the question remains, could it happen again today? The world of aviation is built on layers of technology, layers of training, layers of safeguards designed to prevent the unexpected. But every system, no matter how advanced, carries inherent vulnerabilities. The pitot tube icing that began the disaster is far less likely today due to redesigned hardware. Stall training is vastly improved. Flight monitoring is stronger, but weather remains unpredictable. Human beings remain human, capable of misinterpreting signals under intense duress. And the sky, vast and indifferent, continues to challenge those who fly through it. What makes the story of Air France 447 so haunting is that it began with something so small, something so technical, something so routine that it normally goes unnoticed. A brief icing of pitot tubes. But aviation history often turns on moments like this. Moments so subtle they disappear in the normal flow of flight operations. The lesson of AF 447 is not that modern aviation is fragile. Rather, it is that the margin between safety and catastrophe can be razor thin when multiple failures converge at once. Today, pilots train not just to fly airplanes, but to manage complexity, decipher conflicting warnings, and rely on fundamentals when modern instruments falter. They learn to place instinct beside procedure, aerodynamics beside automation, situational awareness beside technical failure. The story of AF 447 is recited to remind them that a stall at high altitude behaves differently, feels different, and requires immediate, counterintuitive correction. The families of the victims fought for answers for years, and when those answers came, they reshaped the world of aviation. The reforms born from this crash weave into every transatlantic flight today. Aircraft now carry improved systems. Crews undergo more intense manual flight training. Global tracking is more robust. Even communication between air traffic control and transoceanic flights has seen upgrades because silence over the ocean is no longer acceptable. In the end, the question is not merely whether this crash could happen again, but what the story of Air France 447 means for the future. Aviation learns. Aviation adapts. Aviation evolves. The legacy of the 228 lives lost is embedded in every pilot who sits behind the controls today and every passenger who crosses oceans in the quiet confidence of modern air travel. The tragedy of Air France 447 stands as a testament to how quickly routine can unravel and how essential it is to remain vigilant in a world where technology and human skill must work flawlessly together. The night the aircraft fell into the Atlantic remains a somber reminder that aviation safety is never final, never complete, always improving through the lessons carved by those who came before. The sky remains vast, beautiful, and unforgiving. But every improvement, every training update, every redesign